Hello, beautiful human beings, and welcome back to the Ryan Magic Show. This is the first recording I've done in almost 6 months, and today I'm going to be giving a life update and a little bit of a insight to some of the experience that I had spending 3 months full-time meditating in India, and also some of what I was navigating through internally and am still integrating through off the backside of also a month in Europe before I went to India. And so thank you for tuning in. It's definitely been a big integration process, and I'm still integrating my time in India. So I'm just going to jump in and shoot from the hip and share what's true and alive and some of the factors that had me want to go to India and the surprises that came from being in India and where I'm sitting now in my life as a result of all that intense processing. So just a context set. At the start of this year, as I mentioned in a previous episode, I was at a point in my life where I was going through the motions, ticking a lot of the boxes of what life should be about, in a very strong financial position, doing what I love for a living, with beautiful friends, very healthy body, living in one of the best places in the world, and just craving depth, craving going deeper and deeper and deeper. And it's almost like the more that I've gone through life and found what society conditions us to believe is going to create happiness, the more I've found those external measures of happiness, the more I've been able to recognize what actually creates deep meaning and fulfillment in life. And so I really believe in the sentiment that, and in one of the models that I teach at workshops and retreats, people won't start to look deeper in life until they have some kind of setback. And we can see this with celebrities. They spend their whole life pursuing making it as either a music artist or an actor or some kind of professional athlete, and they make it right to the top. And the thing that's kept them going is this excitement that when they get there, it's going to be amazing. But then when they get there, it's not quite what they think. So they try to layer in more performance, more rewards, more money, more significance. And then it starts to become more and more obvious to these people that are experiencing the peak of human achievement. It's obvious for them that have everything that society says is that peak and still feel really low. In fact, feel more pain than they've ever experienced in their life at the point of making it. And my belief is that we don't start going on the spiritual path, the path of deep meaning and fulfillment, until we hit what I call the intolerable pain of separation. And for my journey, that point happened in 2017. And that's when I'm going to say 2018 was when the real pain started to hit. And that's what called me to continue to look deeper and had me eventually shut down my business with the intention of learning to love myself for who I was and to find rich meaning in life more simply. Could I actually enjoy life without all the notoriety that came with being a young, successful entrepreneur? Who would I be without that business? Well, when my meditation teacher asked me that in 2017 or 2018, I said I'd be dead. I'd be dead without this business. There is no chance in hell that I would let this fail. There's no chance in hell that I would shut this down. And that was a seed. And within probably 6 months, I had shut that business down because I realized that it was completely owning my experience of life, my sense of self, my self-worth. Everything was tied to this idea of the somebody that I was. And so since that time in 2018, over the last 6 years, I've been pulling back the layers. And that process of deepening, healing, letting go of emotion, stress, loving different parts of myself, and understanding and learning more about the fragile ego that I have, the fragile personality that I built to try to survive in a scary world. That was my experience as a youngster. And so the layers have just been coming off and off and off. And that did reach a peak point at the end of last year. And again, I'd created so much beauty in my life and it was looking so amazing and it was quite enriching, but I was just craving depth, craving meaning on a deeper level. And I just intuitively knew that it had something to do with spirituality, it had something to do with even potentially religion. And so I started to look. I started to research a little bit about different religions, started to go to a Buddhist community center and a Buddhist monastery. I started to do a little bit of research about Christianity, started to do a little bit of deeper looking into the Vedic tradition, which is somewhat linked to Hinduism. That's the way that the West would categorize that field of wisdom and that way of living. But more accurately, it's called the Vedic tradition because it's non-bias, kind of similar to Buddhism in a way. I started to explore more tribal ways of being, looking at South American culture, the Mayan tradition, and playing with all these different flavors that could give me the chance to explore deeper meaning. And so, as I mentioned earlier, in an earlier episode, I did a vision boarding workshop with my partner in the start of this year, and I had so much resistance to creating a vision board. So much resistance. I didn't want to create anything. I didn't care about my goals because I knew that, cool, I create some goals and I tick them off. It's not going to change my experience. And so I did that vision boarding workshop and my vision board's up there tucked behind my partner's. I can show you guys. This is what I've just totaled my backdrop there. It's all good. But if you're looking at the visual recording on YouTube of this podcast, you can see, I'll just read it out for you so you know what's on here. Essentially, the backdrop of my whole vision board, which has got lots of little images, is flowers, gardens, nature. And then the words that are scattered across are being the self, smiling. It's hard to read because it's upside down. On the actual video, it's mirroring back to me. Giving, responsibility, making a difference, timeless love, connecting to the capital S self, love, sacred, breathe. It's all here and now. Be, the power of silence. Deepen, my dear, meditation, functional patterns. So it's all, in essence, let's keep this up here for the rest of this. It was all, in essence, all I wanted to do was go deep. And so when the opportunity came up to go on this 3-month experience in India, where the curriculum is in a large part to meditate for most of every single day, I was super curious and open to the opportunity. And that's why I went to India as a primary reason. The secondary reason was relevant to wanting to step into more unconditional service and being a meditation teacher, of which I've had already been for 5 years in a very similar modality, but one that didn't have the spiritual initiation as a prerequisite. It didn't have a 3-month wild, deep journey as a requirement to become that teacher. I had to study think 200 online videos and had to do a bunch of tests and stuff like that as well. But it was nowhere near as comprehensive. So I jumped at it. And that's the pre-frame as to why I did it. Now, one other thing that I want to pre-frame, I'm big on thoroughness in the way that I teach. I don't just reel off surface layer things, boom, boom, boom. I really want you to understand these deeper pieces. And if I summarize the whole journey of evolving spiritually, there's two key components to it, really. Actually, that's not true. But there's two that are relevant to the earlier stages, which are where the biggest shifts are felt. One is removing of stress, trauma, emotional pain that stands between oneself and their true self. This is the defragmenting and all the forgetting, all of the pain that wraps around like a wall or a series of masks and layers between someone and the expression of their most authentic self. So actually deconditioning, alchemizing emotions, trauma work, etc. That's a really big aspect of the spiritual journey. Then the second thing is making direct connection with spirit, with that deeper place. And so you can look at, let's say, breath work. Breath work can, in the session, support you to get in touch with some of that pain that is inhibiting your connection to spirit. And then if you meditate, depending on which type of meditation you do, but some of the more pure, deeper types of meditation, like Vedic meditation that I teach now, you're connecting straight to spirit in an aspect. Okay. And there's a bunch of other ways to connect deeply with spirit as well. It's also called transcendence. So they're the two real categories. Now, this purpose of this podcast is to do a little bit of sharing of my experience in India, but I'm definitely going to do some more pointed, what was my experience like in India podcasts and videos. But this is more just a summary of the whole experience and a summary of where I am at the moment. So when someone puts their hand up to say, hey, I want to do a super intense journey, they're essentially asking for layers to be shed, attachments to be challenged and let go. And so when I officially signed up and said I'm going to India to meditate for 3 months, I had some big resistance start to come up. And that started the month before when I traveled to Europe to spend time with my beautiful partner, Shana, and her really kind and beautiful family to go on a bit of a trip around Italy, Slovenia, briefly Croatia. And I had some really magic moments while I was over there. But for the large part, I was in one of the most difficult emotional times that I've been in a long time. I had an enormous amount of emotional pain coming up, all centered around family, all centered around being able to trust, love, and feel safe around other people in connection. And so my time when I was in Europe was incredibly challenging. And I was just, in a large part, super stressed, emotionally eating. There was some beauty there. There really was some beauty. And especially spending time in the mountains. But particularly the last week, spending time in Rome, in the city, squished into an apartment with Shana's family. I had so much stuff coming up. It was incredibly painful. And I was actually just busting to start this experience in India, where I could be in a space where I felt that my emotion would be a lot more accepted and welcome. And in a sense, I'd feel safer to process all this heaviness that had been coming up. And so when I actually got to India, this is why I'm going to do multiple videos and whatnot on this experience, because there's so many different layers to the experience. But one of the biggest themes for me was relevant to this This was the intelligence that Spirit was weaving to support me, to let some of those layers go that I was talking about that were standing between myself and Spirit. And so when I got to India, I had a bit of a rude awakening, because the level of trigger and dysregulation and processing work that I was exposed to in Europe ramped up times 10, being in a group of 20 other people and then meditating for an average of 8 hours a day. It just was enormously challenging in terms of how safe I felt around other people. And there was nothing that was objectively terrible that anyone did or about the experience. It was more that my level of unsafety that legitimately exists in my body, my mind, my ego around being able to trust love because of the pain of my childhood was just, I was confronted with it so enormously. And I was actually shown how fragile I actually am, how insecure I am, how scared I am of rejection, how unsafe I feel being able to trust other people. And that was really, for me, one of the biggest parts of the whole experience. The way that Spirit was weaving a deeper connection with itself, with myself, was through reflecting my biggest karma in a way, or my biggest trauma in this life, which is feeling safe around other people. And I felt so alone in that time in India. So damn alone. I was pretty much almost in an ongoing panic attack for the first 6 weeks. So for the first half of the experience. And I never really came back to feeling really stabilized in myself the other 6 weeks. But comparatively to the first, it was a lot. I was starting to get glimpses of what it feels like to be in my, I guess, integrated self, normal self, the self that existed before I even went to Europe or even went to America. So that was a huge theme for me. Now, the experience was almost like being on a mild plant medicine ceremony, but for 12 weeks solid, the entire time. The average wake up time and bed time was probably 4 a.m. and 11 p.m., I'd say. 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. at night. And we were doing something, either meditating, studying, in a lecture, eating, the entire time. There was a day that was a break day for the teacher every Saturday, where we didn't have lectures, but there was so much study required that it wasn't really a break. And so it was ridiculously intense, the experience, super intense. And because I walked into there asking for a unique experience and wanting to know what would it be like to go that deep. And I want the opportunity to get the value of spending 3 months deeply exploring myself. Well, I got what I asked for, and the way that was needed was, from an internal growth perspective, mainly about connection with other people. And there were so many magic moments on the trip, so much wisdom, so many learnings. I think there was probably 5 hours of lectures a day for 12 weeks straight on deep spiritual wisdom. There was a ton of different amazing spiritually immersive experiences that were deep in the Indian culture, that we got a real VIP experience of meeting and being around a avatar, which essentially means someone that is an incarnation of a god, in this case, a goddess. The ashram that we're staying at was at a temple that had this enlightened being that ran it. And this person is literally the closest thing that you'd come to pretty much to a god in human form. That was wild, and that was not really part of the brochure, as well as doing all these devotional ceremonies that are embedded within the Indian culture that are very, very foreign to the way that I was brought up, and most people would experience spirituality or religion in the West. So an example is an abhishekam, where there'll be a statue and a series of different symbolic liquids are poured over the statue to cleanse the statue, to cleanse the people watching it. There are different mantra that's happening, different ways that fire is used, smells are used, scripture is used, chanting is used. It was really, really unique and such a different cultural experience, but just gave a beautiful transmission of what devotion looks like, but very, very uncomfortable initially for me. And it was a very, very eye-opening experience. And I've received so much from doing that daily for that 12-week period. And I've been doing my own rituals and stuff since then, and practices that take on board the wisdom that I got from those transmissions. So there was lots of beauty, magic moments. It was an incredible experience. But the macro theme for me was it was enormously challenging. It was so hard. And I just could not wait to get back and see my partner, to see Shana. I could not wait to get back, to see my family, to speak to my sister, to see my dad, to chat to my friends. When I was over there, I just realized how important my beautiful people in my life are. That was a really big gift that I got from the experience. So yeah, the experience was hardcore. It was so hardcore for me. It depends on where people were at going into it, what they were intending on getting from it. But because I was really wanting to see myself deeply, I got shown the most fragile part of myself and felt the pain that my dad goes through and has felt for most of his life as someone that has been an addict and had really low mental health and a crazy amount of trauma beyond what I've experienced. I felt what it felt like to suffer at such a deep emotional level, and it was excruciating. It was really excruciating. And so the intention for the teacher was for us to really come out of the other end of the experience quite integrated. And so we started to ramp down the spiritual practice in the last few weeks, started to get more involved in the world, less reclusive, and started the integration process. And it was kind of suggested that we'd integrate faster than if we didn't do that. However, I kind of thought that I'd be able to function pretty well after a couple of weeks. And I mean, I could still do everything. I could drive, I could talk, so that nothing like that was a problem. But my nervous system, the upgrade, so to speak, from doing so much deep emotional work, like without exaggerating, I would say it was probably 4 years worth of emotional work and spiritual evolution. I say 4 years. Yeah, I'm just going to say around 4 years worth in 3 months. So you can imagine, because you listening to this, I know you're on the spiritual journey. I'm just going to pause this recording because the doorbell's ringing, and I'll come back and I'll resume. So I just answered the door because I knew that some juices were being delivered for a cleanse that I'm doing over the next 3 days with Shana. And I ended up getting in a 10 to 15 minute chat with the delivery driver about religion and shadow work, which was awesome. But now I'm back. Now, as I was saying, you guys will know what happens if you spend a bunch of time at a workshop or a retreat, or you double down on a little chapter of inner work, there's integration that's required off the back end. And sometimes it gets more painful before it improves. Kind of like if you're renovating a house, the end product is going to be significantly better than the product that you started with. But if you looked halfway through, there's going to be walls missing. There's going to be plaster everywhere. There's going to be paint everywhere. There's going to be rubbish everywhere. And if you looked at it at that point, you'd be like, hang on a second, I had a fully functioning house before, and now my place looks like a tip. You'd be defeating the purpose and missing the point of the renovation. And that's what happens when we are on the spiritual journey. And so now, 6 weeks down the line, I'm very much still integrating this process, but I've been able to cash in on a bunch of time that I've been very graceful with myself. Spent a lot of time resting off the back end of what was an intense experience. You'd think meditating for 3 months is meant to make you relaxed. Not really. When we're teaching meditation, it's advised that we don't allow people to meditate for more than 2 20-minute meditations a day, because when you have that space, it brings up, it creates a vortex and it sucks in the resistance and challenge and pain and trauma to be alchemized. And also things in your life that are no longer relevant, that need to be shifted. And if you do too much at once, you get a lot of pain. You're going to navigate it once, and too much too soon, it actually allows things, can make things be net slower in growth. And that's why the quote, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, is very relevant to trauma work. People are always in a rush to try to get the upgrade. I want to heal all my trauma, do some big breath work. I'm going to do heaps of plant medicine because I just want to shed all these layers. They need to be shed. They need to be worked with and then alchemized, integrated. That takes time. And if you try to do it too fast, it'll actually take you longer. Kind of like the tortoise and the hare analogy. Anyway, if you are on the spiritual path, my message to you right now is that you are in such a beautiful place. And you may not necessarily be able to see, comprehend, and really understand the magnitude of the work that you're doing inside, because the inner work functions differently to any other area of life and how all of society functions. In society, discipline gets results. Results are quantitative. I've been able to find myself a girlfriend. I've been able to lose 10 kilos. I've been able to make $1 million. I've been able to invest and get 3 investment properties. And it's so externally based, and the measurements are so obvious. They're so physical. I was single. Now I'm in a partnership. Okay. So that's obvious. But when you're doing this deep inner work, why are we doing it? It's because we've tapped into the fact that the inner work is not, doing the external stuff is not going to actually make you any more fulfilled. And so we actually get into this path to change the inner experience of life. And Sadhguru has this beautiful quote. There's this is what he says, I'm paraphrasing, but something like, there's 2 important aspects to life: big action and inner experience. But if the more that you take big action without the inner experience, the level of suffering exponentially grows. In other words, like if you don't take much action and don't have much inner work, you'll be suffering less than someone that's taken an enormous amount of action and hasn't done the inner work. And I can attest to that, because having created a lot of external success before I started doing the inner work, I felt so much pain. I just didn't have the capacity to understand what was happening. And I would distract, and it built up until it erupted. And I realized that my whole reality was built on insecurity. And I just had 10 tons of suffering in my system that had been unprocessed. And by gosh, it was difficult. This is why celebrities end up on drugs. this is why famous people, so many people that are in positions that we celebrate in society are in rehab or struggling with alcoholism or addicted to painkillers, because they've achieved everything that they got told were going to make them happy, and they're feeling worse than ever, right? So you have pursued this spiritual path because you know and you sense somewhere in there you've experienced enough pain to go, no, the inner experience is damn important. So you start doing psychotherapy, work with a psychotherapist, start doing breath work, start meditating, start spending more time in nature, start learning about yourself, start learning about what life and the universe is really about, the deeper truths. And it's very difficult to recognize the progress of that at times, because again, society is quantitative. Society is about more is better. Society is about externals. And so when we start taking our foot off the accelerator of the externals and we start putting it on the brakes and focusing on the internals, we're not driving as far with the externals. We're actually going to initially start to experience less external success. Less external success. And that can be really confronting, because that's all that your ego knows. That's all that you've been taught, that life is good. You're doing a good job if you've got good externals. And if you pause the externals and start focusing more internally, even though there's big transformation and it's important and it's meaningful and you are changing, it can be very difficult initially to recognize that progress, because it's qualitative, it's intangible. There are emotional factors. How you actually feel when you're having an interaction with someone is an example of what it looks like to be successful with this inner journey. And it is so difficult in what they call in Sanskrit Maya, which is illusion. It's so difficult not to be sold on the way that society paints life to be, and to actually prioritize fulfillment as your top priority. And so I'm just essentially pausing this podcast's life update of me to give you the transmission and to recognize you, celebrate you for saying, I actually care about my inner experience. I actually care about my inner experience. And as I was saying with the renovation, you might still be ripping walls out. You might still be breaking down, and that breakthrough hasn't come yet, but it's coming. If you're on this path, you are on a special path that everyone's moving towards in this lifetime or the next, or the one after, or the one after that. But if you have had the good fortune to realize that the reality of life goes deeper than validation and achievement, then you've won the lottery, essentially. And trust me when I say that you are in a special place. You're in a special place. And there will be little milestones on your journey. It's really challenging initially. And this is why a lot of people start the spiritual journey and they do a little bit and then they U-turn and try to recreate the life that they had before they started. Because in my experience at least, and maybe it's definitely everyone's path is unique, but the first few years, while the ego is still holding on, and while external desires and all this vanity pulls are intoxicating your mind and determining your orientation, when that separation and shift in leadership, because when the ego is in the leadership position of your life, doing the spiritual work is a constant threat to the ego. So you kind of get one foot in ego reality of ignorance, one foot in this new world, and the ego is constantly pulling and yanking at you to try to stay in the past, to try to stay and keep your attachments alive and keep your current reality the same, because it doesn't want to change, it doesn't want to evolve, it doesn't want to let go, it doesn't want to surrender. While that wrestle and tug of war between your ego and your essence is still in motion, although you're growing and you're moving forward, you're suffering a lot. Then when you start to actually make enough progress that you can witness, feel, and experience the shifts, those intangible internal shifts, when you've made enough of those recognitions and you can have enough self-awareness to see, feel, experience your transformation, and that essence, your true self, your heart starts leading your life and determining your decision making. And what that looks like is simply choosing to make fulfillment your top priority in life. That means you're being sensible. Because it makes no sense to be in a body where you feel you're having the best experience when you're doing certain things, but to ignore those things and then to go and spend time doing things that you should do that make your experience worse for no reason other than the fact that you're kind of like following fear. That's just makes no sense. You just have a worse life. And this is why top 5 regrets of the dying, most people will die with those regrets if they haven't yet gotten on the spiritual path. The top 5 regrets are living a life that other people want of you, not the one that you want of yourself. They regret not spending as much time with friends, not expressing how they really feel, being in touch with their emotions, not being kinder to themselves, and working too hard. That's what capitalism, not that there's anything wrong with capitalism because it creates a lot of structure and innovation. But if you're stuck in that paradigm of more is better, external world is better, and meanwhile you're ignoring what your truths are in your heart, and you're living for this set of metrics that other people gave you, that you didn't even choose with your own sovereignty, you're really, it's illogical, and suffering's there, and fulfillment is not. And so one has really graduated in a big way on their spiritual path when you get to make fulfillment your top priority and actually make decisions based on that. Choose the relationships that give you the greatest fulfillment, not vanity. Choose the work that gives you the greatest fulfillment, not vanity. Or at least enjoying your job because you care about your experience, not making the association, I'm in a job, and so therefore I'm a failure, and not giving yourself permission to enjoy it. That's not fulfillment consciousness. That's fear consciousness. That's based on the ego and attachment. So you are doing amazing. You are in the perfect place. You are in the most incredible place. Your path is perfect, and you're exactly where you need to be. And if you're touching on this spiritual journey, there's a lot of different seasons and themes that lie ahead for you that are completely different to what you've had in your life up until this date. And I am celebrating you so hard for being on this path. And trust me, that if you persevere, your life will get better and better and better. It might look like a mess, like the renovation for a period of time, but you will break through a threshold of embracing the pain that's blocking you from you and your true essence, a feeling of wholeness. Holy, whole, and wholesome, the way that I love to refer to living a fulfilled life. Sacred, holy, whole, you feel whole, perfect, and complete in yourself. And it's wholesome. The decisions you make are healthy. You choose healthy friendships. You choose wholesome friendships. You choose wholesome ways of eating, wholesome ways of being, wholesome activities to do, wholesome ways to work and serve. It's so beautiful. It is so beautiful. And this all comes from embracing the spiritual path and doing the deep, difficult deconditioning work necessary to address the pain, the emotions, the trauma. And you're on that path, and you are doing incredible, my friend. Incredible. And so to bring the podcast back to where am I sitting now, to give you and finish this life update, well, I'm feeling this beautiful, and I'm going to do more updates on this, but it's like my prayers were answered. Just my desire in my heart, my intentions to feel a deeper meaning and a deeper way of being are here. They're here, and I'm getting to live this beautiful life that feels so much more fulfilling and rich. And there is nothing that is more valuable to me than feeling fulfilled, having a rich, deep experience of life. So I'm feeling a lot of gratitude right now. And right now, but this is my first podcast episode back. Why? Because I'm excited to serve. I'm excited to be back. I'm not in a rush to serve, but I will be scheduling in some meditation courses, which is the place. If you don't yet have Vedic meditation on your toolkit as a twice daily practice, the reason that I went and did this Vedic meditation teacher training was after practicing for 7 years and doing plant medicine, 10 plus different types of breath work, seeing a psychologist, seeing psychotherapists, seeing different healers, doing every modality under the sun in an enormous way, spending a ridiculous amount of time in different modes of spiritual practice, coming back to seeing and feeling that the most powerful way to evolve spiritually and also process stress, the two parts to the spiritual path, direct contact with the divine and also removing the layers between you and the divine, both happen with a pure meditation practice like Vedic meditation that is a transcendence practice. To transcend means to go beyond. And to go beyond means to move past the relative, the changing world that we live in, and go to our source. Go to the unmanifest, the point of singularity where all creation spawns. And when you enter that place that is the creator of everything, and you literally make touch point with that, that is the most pure way that you can merge with the divine to make your experience of living more divine. And then as you're touching that place consistently, you're also inviting in that spaciousness. You're inviting in the parts of you that are desiring to be alchemized, supported, loved, and let go, to come up to be healed. And it accelerates that journey a lot. So I don't really coach anyone one-to-one without saying, first thing you need to do is learn to meditate, whether it's with me or somebody else. But anyway, I will be teaching meditation courses because I know if I don't do anything else, if someone doesn't come and learn my whole curriculum of understanding life, which I think and have experienced to be the most helpful thing that I've found in the whole world, even more than the way that the Vedic wisdom is taught, even more than the way that Buddhism is taught, the way that I've had to understand how life works, and the way that I've pieced together my understanding of the universe in an integrative, practical, simple way with what I originally called the core method, but I teach it at my workshop. Even if someone didn't do any of that and all I did was give them meditation, they're going to be at a significant advantage to having a fulfilling life versus not having that practice. And they just take it for the rest of their lives. So I know I'm doing God's work or the work of the divine. I'm being a light worker by teaching people to meditate. So we'll be doing that. Courses to come. I'm going to put another Art of Fulfillment in the calendar. I'm going to put it in the calendar for either later this year or early next year soon. And I'm also I've got a few new little exciting events and projects that will be coming out soon as well. But I'm not in a rush. So keep an eye out for those. And I will be putting a lot of content out there that is supporting you to have the most aligned, powerful, spiritual suite of practices that you possibly can, to have the most powerful approach to life. And the only other thing that I really want to say in this episode before because there's so much more that I'll share about India, but I just want to do a little life update, is that one of my big realizations, spending so much time feeling into and thinking about and growing through my fear of intimacy, my mistrust of love and other people, and my deep wounding, which, as I said, is all centered around being able to feel that I can trust love, because I was betrayed by both of my primary caregivers, not because they were bad parents, because they're beautiful people, but because of their trauma that they had inflicted to them when they were younger. But that left my nervous system not being able to trust love. And I'm going to do a whole episode on this specific topic, but one thing that I've realized, I knew this before I went to India, but there's a nuance that I've realized recently, which is the ultimate leveler in life that you can't skip past, the area of life that will continue to struggle without doing the deep inner work, are relationships. One cannot have deep, meaningful, trusting, intimate relationships without doing the emotional work, without doing the deep inner work. Unless they came into this life enlightened, if someone's got some sort of trauma, even if it was being emotionally neglected, where someone's parents didn't really see them as a kid or celebrate them for their emotions, that's enough. But what I've realized is that intimacy is, because intimacy is such a gift, and it determines the quality of a relationship. Now, a lot of people, and this has always confused me until the last month, maybe it was obvious to you, but I've really been struggling with this concept, is that for me, relationships are difficult. For a lot of my friends and clients that have been doing inner work for many years and that have become more present, become more self-aware, have become more emotionally in tune, yet have more struggle in their relationships than what it seems that a lot of couples do that are more mainstream couples that don't engage in deep inner work. And I've always thought, well, why is that? What is going on there? And I know so many examples of this. And the reason that is the case is that someone can have a functional relationship that works around intimacy. Someone can have a really healthy, functional relationship that lacks intimacy without doing the deep inner work. So maybe they don't make love as often. Maybe they do, but they're not very present. Maybe they don't feel seen, deeply seen, and they're not able to communicate their desires. But what happens when we do the deep inner work is we continue, and it's a spectrum. It's not just I can feel safe in intimacy, but I don't. I used to be able to, and now I used to not be able to, and now I can feel comfortable in intimacy. It's a spectrum. It's a full spectrum. And there's more richness and fulfillment and experiences of deep love of what this life really has to offer. The more inner work that you do, you open up the capacity to feel safer in the depth of intimacy, to be able to see someone for the truth of what they are and feel unity. It's such a rich, amazing flavor of that by doing the deep inner work. Whereas anyone can get in a relationship that works. My grandparents, for example, before my grandpa passed away, they would see each other on the weekend, but then live separately for 5 days a week. And without going into any details, there was a lot of incredible dysfunction in that. But from the surface, you'd be like, you guys are such a beautiful couple. You've stayed married for so long. And how have you made it work? But the dysfunction behind the scenes, the scandals behind the scenes, and the lack of emotional depth is enormous. The commitment's there, but the love's not. The intimacy's not. And so if you're on this path, it's because somewhere in your heart you know that intimacy is a value of yours, and you want to crack open to the possibility of what this human experience has to offer, which is not about creating the next Apple company and inventing the next AI software. It could be, sure, that's a big part of life. Purpose is a huge part of life. But the richness of experience can only be fully felt when you do the inner work. So again, I'm celebrating you. And to be clear, I'm very early on my journey of feeling safe in intimacy. But compared to the average person, my capacity for intimacy is incredible. But I know for me, it's incredibly new. And I'm really having to learn to navigate this pain as I open up to more and more of that trauma. So I'm sitting at this place right now where I'm resting a lot. I am reading and studying a lot. I'm loving my study. I'm doing a lot of study at the moment of Christ consciousness, which is really interesting because I spent 3 months away deeply studying the Vedic tradition, which is definitely the most sophisticated and accurate form of spiritual wisdom in the world by a million miles intellectually. Like the level of depth in that tradition of understanding spirit is extraordinary. It's like 1,000 times more advanced than Christianity. It's absolutely unbelievable. And I'm fortunate that I've been studying it for 7 years because my understanding of how life works is so much clearer thanks to that. And a lot of the models that I teach have been supported by my understanding of it. But I also see ways in which it misses key aspects to life, namely in the level of depth that it goes into around trauma work, shedding layers of emotions and somatic release, etc. But I'm doing a lot of study of the world, a lot of study of Christ consciousness, and a lot of spiritual practice. And I'm so excited to be serving more. I actually did my Reiki level 1. I know a lot of you would have done the Reiki courses. It's been on my to-do list for many years, which was a fun, beautiful experience. So I'm just studying a lot right now, resting a lot, and just emerging like a little meerkat, just popping my head back in the space and feeling so grateful to have had that whole experience and to be getting to live in context of all those upgrades and emotional processing work that I did, and have never felt as lucky to be embracing spirituality as I do now. And I've never felt as capable to enjoy the fruits of that as I am now. And so please keep tuning in. And once again, keep up the amazing work. You're on the most special and beautiful path. And I hope that I get to see you soon and give you a big hug in person. And I'll see you in the next episode. Peace out. Much love.